What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel Hand Waving. Your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 is here again with a brand new Naruto fanfic that's going to change everything. Today's fanfic is titled, What If Naruto Married Hinata and Finally Found True Love? Part 1. To be started fanfic. Returning home. It was a warm autumn day in Konoha. The cherry trees were in full bloom, their boughs filled with pink leaves. The village was quiet, even more so than usual. The two shinobi who watched the main village gate were bored as usual. That is, they were bored until they saw two shinobi who had not been inside the village walls in for 3 years. An older man wearing light robes and a young man wearing a black and orange track suit were walking down the trail. Their voices could be heard. So Naruto, how does it feel to be home again? We've been away for 3 years and coming back home must be nice for you. The blonde teenager next to him nodded and he spoke. I've really missed everybody. I wonder how Sakura and everyone else are doing. As if in response to his question, a flash of pink hair stopped in front of him. She was now shorter than Naruto, but not by much. Naruto, is it really you? Naruto stopped and he smiled while placing his hand on the back of his head sheepishly. Ah, Sakura, it's good to see you again. Sakura looked him in the eyes and she smiled back at him. Is that the best you can say after 3 years? We all missed you. Everyone has been worried about you, especially Kakashi and Tsunade. Hopefully none of Jiraiya's traits have rubbed off on you. Naruto smiled and looked up at the bigger male. Maybe 1 or 2. You know how this guy gets his inspiration, don't you? Sakura shuddered visibly and she nodded. Don't even get me thinking of that. The 3 of them laughed. Sakura walked with the 2 men and they talked of various things, mainly Naruto's training. As the 3 of them walked, heads turned everywhere they went. Everyone was staring at Naruto. He had grown in the last 3 years, physically and mentally. One head in particular stopped and stared at him. Lavender eyes met blue, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Naruto Uzumaki stared straight into the eyes of the shy and reserved Hinata Hyuga. Hinata was carrying a bouquet of roses and she dropped them as a bright red blush spread across her face. She began to stammer and speak in a hurried manner. Naruto? She asked and Naruto gave her a smile before he stooped down to pick up her fallen roses. Hinata was shaking. Naruto looked into her eyes again and he placed the roses into her hands. It's me, Hinata. Hinata looked towards the ground and she closed her eyes. Naruto's home was the only thought running through the raven-haired Kunoichi's mind. Her breathing was becoming short and she smiled uneasily. Thank you, Naruto. I have to be moving. I have to deliver these flowers to Kurenai-sensei before they wilt. Naruto looked back at Sakura and then at Jiraiya. Sakura and Jiraiya both nodded, knowing what he was going to say next. Can I come with you, Hinata? Hinata's blush darkened from red to crimson. If you would like to, I would enjoy the company. Naruto nodded and he waved to them both as Hinata started to turn towards Sakura. Sakura quietly mouthed the words tell him to Hinata, but Hinata shook her head. Not yet, she mouthed back and she turned to Naruto. Shall we be moving Naruto? Naruto smiled and he nodded. You seem tense, Hinata. You should relax more. You're stuttering an awful lot. Hinata gave him a smile and she took a deep breath. Thank you, Naruto. I really enjoy the time we get to have together. How was your training? Naruto shook his head and he smiled. It went well. I learned a lot from Jiraiya. He's a really good teacher, believe it or not. I can use 2 Rasengans at once and my shadow clone abilities have improved as well. The 2 shinobi continued to walk talking of their abilities until they reached Kurenai's home, a small apartment. Naruto knocked on the door and Hinata started to fidget nervously. She pressed her fingers together nervously like she always did as the door swung open. In the doorway stood Kurenai Yuhi, Hinata's sensei and friend. A small blush crept across the younger woman's face and she handed the flowers to her teacher. Kurenai looked at Naruto and she smiled. Finally home, Naruto. We've all missed you, especially Hinata. Naruto gave a smile and he put both hands behind his head nervously. Hinata was now looking into Kurenai's eyes, as if pleading silently to not reveal her secret crush. Kurenai nodded very slightly at Hinata, and Naruto looked at them both with a confused expression on his face. He spoke rather quickly. I missed Hinata too. Hinata's head snapped up and she looked into Naruto's eyes. He missed me. I missed everyone. Sakura, Shikamaru, Hinata, Kiba, even Shino. I'm just glad I can be back home with my friends again. Hinata looked down at the floor and she smiled slightly. He missed everyone, not just me. Naruto looked at her and he saw that Hinata was looking away from him. Hinata, why don't we get some ramen together? We can catch up on old times. I want to tell you more about my training. I want to hear how much you've improved too. Hinata smiled up at Kurenai and she smiled at her student. Go on, Hinata, it might be nice to be with him. Hinata nodded and she turned to face her not-so-secret crush. Everyone knew Hinata was in love with Naruto, except for Naruto, that is. Hinata nodded and she turned. I'd like that, and Naruto. Very much. I want to tell you all about the progress I've made since we last met. I'm still no match for your Neji, but I'm slowly becoming stronger and more confident in myself. Naruto smiled and he started to walk with Hinata through the streets of Konoha towards Ichiraku Ramen. Heads turned to see the pair together, to see Hinata at long last with her crush. Naruto remained blissfully unaware as to why everyone else was staring, but he was happy nonetheless. It was his first day back and he was with a dear friend, one of many that he cherished above all else. Unintentional confession. Naruto and Hinata made their way through the village streets to the Ichiraku ramen stand. Everyone in the village knew how much the young man loved his ramen. Naruto quietly walked with Hinata until they reached the stand. Naruto parted the curtains and stepped aside, allowing Hinata to enter first. Hinata cast a warm smile at him and she took a seat in the center. Naruto waited until she was seated and he took the seat next to her and he smiled at her. Ayame and Tsuki both looked over at their customers and they both beamed to see Naruto. Naruto, you're back from training, it seems. What can I get for you today? Naruto looked at Hinata and he smiled. I'll have whatever Hinata is having. Hinata blushed visibly and she looked at him with her lavender eyes. Naruto, why do you want me to choose? Naruto gave her his big goofy grin and he put his arms behind his head. Because I always get the same thing every time. I want to try something new this time. And if you pick it, it should taste wonderful. Hinata was smiling inwardly now. She felt like she was floating above herself, watching the scene unfold. It feels just like I always dreamed, to be able to just be by Naruto's side. Even if he doesn't feel the same way about me, I can be happy just like this, thought the raven-haired Kunoichi. Hinata had spaced out and she started to look at the menu. She decided and she looked at Naruto. Is pork miso okay? Naruto nodded and he smiled. Pork miso it is. The four people laughed. Tsuki and Ayame retreated behind the door to prepare the food. Hinata was feeling at ease now, and she turned to face Naruto. How was your training? You were gone for so long, I'm sure you've surpassed everyone in the village. Naruto shook his head. I wouldn't say that. I've definitely grown stronger, but I've not grown that strong. I need to strong enough to protect my precious people. Everyone in this village is precious to me in their own way. Even you, Hinata. You're one of the few people I can relax and be myself around. I said it at the Chunin exam, but I like people like you. Hinata smiled again and she looked at Naruto intently. I remember you saying that. It made me happy. I always thought you saw me as a weird quiet girl. I always wanted a nice day with my friends, but everyone is always so busy with their missions. Naruto smiled and he nodded at her as he looked into her eyes. Blue met lavender once again and a pink hue rose in the shy Hyuga's cheeks. Naruto broke the uneasy silence while they waited for their food. How have you been? I've been worried about you, Hinata. I know how your father views you. Hinata looked down and she sighed very slightly. He's not happy as always. He's trying his hardest to marry me off to any clan that will have a Hyuga for a wife. I tell him I have someone I love, but he doesn't like the man I love. Hinata was blushing a furious red now and Naruto smiled widely, but not at her. Tsuki had brought their food. In each of the ramen seller's hands was a steaming bowl of pork miso ramen. He sat both bowls down in front of them and he walked away. Naruto smiled eagerly and he waited for Hinata to break her chopsticks before doing the same with his own. Time to eat, he said, and he dipped the chopsticks into the broth. He smiled as the food touched his lips. It's heavenly, Hinata. She smiled at him and she nodded as she ate as well. They continued in silence until both of them had eaten their share of the ramen. Naruto had finished his own ramen and he looked at Hinata once she had finished. I'll get this, he said, and he pulled the ryo from his frog wallet. Hinata giggled and she poked his wallet full of money. You've been saving up for a long time, haven't you, Naruto? He nodded and he handed the ryo to Tsuki, who smiled. You're both welcome any time. Naruto hopped off of his seat and he tilted his head towards the main street. Can I walk you home? I have to go check in with Tsunade anyway. Hinata blushed and she nodded. I'd like that, and Naruto. The two of them started down the main street and they talked of each other's 3 years apart, how each of them had grown and matured. You're a chunin now. Congratulations, Hinata. I'm really happy to hear that you've made it so far. It also doesn't surprise me that Neji is a Junin now. He was always strong, but to think he'd make Junin at 17. I'm still a genin. I need to take the exam again, he said with a heavy sigh at the end of his monologue. Hinata didn't know what else to say. She just lightly placed her right hand on his left shoulder and she smiled at him. Don't feel bad, Naruto. You'll make a fine shinobi. You're already one of the best in this village. Rank doesn't mean anything. Naruto smiled at her and he placed his hand over hers. Hinata blushed again and she quickly retracted her hand. Naruto gave a smile and he stopped walking as they reached the Hyuga compound. Thank you for a great time today, Naruto. I had a lot of fun with you. I'll see you later, okay? Hinata opened the gate and she entered the grounds. Naruto watched her go and he smiled to himself. He hadn't had that much fun in long time. However, he heard voices coming from the compound. HW could see that Hinata was arguing with her father. I forbid you to see that demon scum again. How dare you defy me again? Hiashi Hyuga was livid. Naruto kept his head down and he listened to Hinata sob. I love him, father. You don't know how I feel. You want to marry me off to a foreign clan, but you never once thought of what I want. I love Naruto Uzumaki, and you have no right to marry me off like I'm an object. Naruto felt the blood drain from his face. She loves me. Why me? I'm not good enough to be married to Hinata Hyuga. Hearing these words, Naruto stood up and he ran. He ran until he reached the Hokage residence. He didn't know what to think anymore. He pushed that memory aside for the time being and he regained his composure for his meeting with Jiraiya and Tsunade. He hadn't even been back a day yet and he was already confused once again. Take me there. Naruto had gone to his meeting with the Hokage and had returned to his own home. He was tired and he had a lot on his mind. Hinata loves me. But could I make her happy? Come to think of it, it's been a long time that I've known her. But seeing her the first time in 3 years, she's grown very beautiful. Maybe I can try to talk to her about it. But then again, maybe I'd just better play it off like I don't know. I want her to tell me face to face. But she's so beautiful, definitely beautiful. I don't feel like I'm not good enough. I love to make people happy. I just want her to be happy. That's all I want. These were Naruto's thoughts, and he drifted into a deep sleep. Hinata was face down in her pillow sobbing. Why can't he just give me his blessing? Why can't he accept my love for Naruto? She said to her younger sister Hanabi Hyuga. Hanabi was sitting at the edge of Hinata's bed, dangling her feet over the side of the bed. Hanabi, now 11, was stroking her elder sister's cheek. I don't know if now is the best time to say this, but I saw Naruto outside the window when father was reprimanding you. At least I think it was him. He took off in quite a hurry and I can't use Byakugan yet, so I can't be certain. Hinata's eyes snapped open and she sat up straight, her long raven hair falling over her shoulders. Oh no, if it was him, he knows. I feel like a weight has been lifted, but I didn't want him to find out this way. Hanabi smiled and she poked her older sister's cheek. So tell him properly. That's what I would do. You need to have more confidence in yourself, Hinata. Hinata smiled at her sister and she nodded. I'll try my best. It's getting late, Hanabi. We should get some sleep soon. Hanabi nodded and she hopped off of Hinata's bed and she exited the room. Hinata slipped into her night clothes and she lay awake in her bed thinking. Father doesn't notice that I'm a person. Hanabi is my only source of comfort. What a fine older sister I've turned out to be. And now Naruto may know about my feelings for him. But if he's taught me one thing, it is to believe in myself. And I'll do just that. Thank you, Naruto. Even though you don't know why I love you, I always will. No matter what happens, I'll always believe in you. With those thoughts, the raven-haired Kunoichi fell asleep, her tears gone and her lips formed into a small smile. Naruto awoke with the rising sun. He had grown accustomed to rising with the sun. He quickly cast aside his night clothes and he entered his shower, letting the hot water rush over his body. After his shower, he quickly dressed in his track suit and he headed out the door into the main streets. Thoughts of the day before ran through his mind and he smiled. I'll deal with this in my own way. I will just act like I always have. I can't become involved with anyone. Not now that Akatsuki is after me. I'm sorry, Hinata, but if it were safe to love you back, I would. You've always been one of my favorite people, since the Chunin exams, that is. I know you for who you really are. Naruto didn't want anyone else to get hurt because of him. He loved his friends dearly, and he didn't want them to die or lose their dreams for his sake. This was his decision, and he didn't want to change his mind. Hinata rose with the chirping of several songbirds outside her window. She smiled at the bright sunny day. Her name meant sunny place, and it was days like this that she liked best. She slipped out of her nightclothes and into her day attire, her purple jacket over her favorite shirt. She stepped outside her door and she saw her cousin Neji Hyuga looking over the koi pond in their yard. Good morning, Neji. Neji turned his head to see his younger cousin and he smiled at her. Good morning, Hinata. Going to meet Naruto again? Hinata blushed furiously and she shook her head. How did you know about that? Neji sighed and he leaned his back against the railing of the little red bridge they stood on. You know how your father knows everything about everyone in this village. He had people out looking for you for half the day. When he found out you were with Naruto, he wanted me to drag you back. I said no. I believe he could be the best thing for you and the clan. And you have my approval of Naruto, for what that's worth. Hinata was dumbfounded by what her elder cousin had told her. She didn't know where to start. Neji had stood up for her and he had given her his blessing. Neji, thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. Do you know where he is? I need to talk to him. Hanabi said he overheard father's and my argument last night. Did you see anything? Neji nodded. I saw him when I came from my room. He was crouching by the window. And then he bolted. I've never seen anyone move that fast, not even Lee. Hinata nodded and she hugged her cousin briefly before she dashed past him into the streets of Konoha. Hinata always knew where Naruto was thanks to her Byakugan. She focused her chakra into her eyes and she smiled as she found him in the training fields. She made her way to the training grounds and she sat and she watched him. Naruto was practicing his shadow clone techniques with his shirt off and Hinata watched his training intently. Naruto eventually sat down and he looked over to see her. Hinata blushed and she looked into the trees. Naruto walked over to her and he smiled. Mind if I sit with you? Hinata found her eyes glued to his muscular chest. She was focused more on his rippling abs and all she could do was nod fervently. Naruto sat beside her after he replaced his shirt. How are you doing? Everything okay at home? Hinata froze. He does know, but I don't want him to worry about me. Everything is fine. Just my father is trying harder than ever to marry me off. Naruto nodded and he looked into her eyes. Why does he want to marry you off so badly? You're a great shinobi and more than capable of taking over the clan after him. You were always right behind Sakura in the academy exams. Hinata shook her head and she sighed lightly. I never told you what he said to Kurenai after I became a genin, did I? Naruto shook his head and he scooted a little closer to her. He said I was superfluous to the clan, a liability. He compared me to Hanabi, saying she was already stronger than I was. All my father cares about is power. I'm the shy, quiet daughter he never wanted. I'm nothing to him. Naruto stood up and he held his hand out to her. Take my hand and come with me. I want to show you a wonderful place I go to think all alone. Hinata blushed and she looked into his eyes, lavender meeting blue once again. Except this time, Naruto smiled at her. He looked right into her eyes and smiled. Hinata was at peace with him at last. She eventually nodded and she placed her slender hand in his. I'll go with you. Hinata stood up, dusted off her clothes and Naruto smiled. I found a lake deep in the woods. It's wonderful. Hinata smiled and she nodded. Take me there. Our special place. Naruto took Hinata by the hand and he smiled at her, causing the shy Hyuga to blush slightly. Naruto held onto her hand tightly and he started to run across the training field. Hinata followed him closely, enjoying the attention he was giving her. Hinata decided on a bold move and she laced her fingers with his, and she gripped his hand as if her life depended on it. Naruto only smiled as they reached the forest. We have to hop through the trees here. Stay close to me because it is a little hard to find. Naruto slowly let go of her hand and Hinata nodded. She didn't want this moment to end. He's showing me a place he found himself. This couldn't get any better. He doesn't have to tell me he loves me. Just being alone with Naruto makes me so happy. She watched as Naruto hopped into the tree line and began to dash through the treetops. Hinata followed him easily. She was a chunin now and she had grown considerably stronger, but she was still no match for most chunin in the village. They leapt through the trees and stayed high up for at least 15 minutes. Naruto signaled for her to follow him and he dropped down to the forest floor. It's here. I marked the trees with a kunai so I could find it easier. Naruto smiled at her as she landed gracefully on her 2 feet. She seemed almost like a dancer, as graceful as she was. Hinata smiled as she ran her hands through her long raven hair and it shimmered softly in the light that filtered through the treetops. She's beautiful, I just don't want her to be hurt because of me. He thought and he pushed the branches out of the way. Hinata followed and she gasped audibly at what she saw. It was a crystal blue lake surrounded by flowers of all hues. Roses, daisies, tulips and sunflowers grew around the sparkling clear lake. Oh, it's beautiful, and Naruto. Hinata sat by the lake and dangled her feet into the water. Naruto sat down beside her and he smiled. I found this place by accident. I was training in the trees and I fell and landed right in the lake. He chuckled softly and Hinata giggled. It's really a beautiful place. I'm really glad you showed me this. Naruto smiled at her and he nodded. You're the only one I've ever shown this to. No one else has ever seen this but me and now you. Hinata blushed and she giggled slightly again. Why me though? Naruto tilted his head back and he looked into the sky before he turned his head to look into her eyes. Because you're one of the few people who from the very beginning saw me as Naruto Uzumaki, not the Kyuubi. I've known for a long time that most people despised me, but it was because I had Iruka, you and Kakashi that I've become what I am today. I'd give my life to protect you all, and that's why I'm not going to become close to anyone, aside from friendships. Akatsuki is hunting me, Hinata. And they'll use my precious people to get to me. And I'd never forgive myself if something happened to you all, especially my dearest friend, the one who always believed in me from the very beginning. Hinata was dumbstruck. A red blush shot across her face. Hinata didn't know what to say. He thought so highly of her for so long and she didn't realize it. She finally caught her voice and she broke down in tears. Naruto, I've always believed in you. Your sense of optimism is what kept me going through all the hard times. When you cheered me on against Neji in our first Chunin exam, I was so happy. I wanted you to see how much I'd grown. When you told me you liked people like me before your own match with Neji, I was even happier. I've always watched you, and you helped me grow. I've always admired you and your unshakable courage and optimism. What happened next was a blur in Hinata's mind. Naruto wrapped his arms around her in a gentle hug and he ran his hand through her long raven hair. I know Hinata. I've known for a long time. I just don't want you to be hurt because of me. I can promise you something though. This will be our special place, and the next time we come here alone, it will mean all the fighting is done. Hinata looked up at him and she nodded slightly as she pushed her face into his chest. I'll hold you to that promise. Naruto smiled and he nodded. You know I don't go back on my words. Hinata softly disentangled herself from his arms and she smiled. She reached into her jacket and she withdrew some of her healing medicine. Take this with you. Now that you're back, I know you'll be busy with your missions, but I want you to have this. It is improved medicine that I have made. It also restores your chakra. I made it myself. If you ever get hurt, just apply this to the wound. It will also restore your strength. Naruto smiled at her and he took it from her. Thank you, Hinata. We should be getting back soon. Hinata nodded and she stood up. My father will be furious if he sees I've been with you again. Neji approves of you though. He's one of your precious people, isn't he? Naruto nodded. Everyone in this village is my family. This village and everyone and everything in it are precious to me. Even though your father does not like me, I still consider him precious, because he's a member of the Konohagakure family. The third Hokage's ideals have been passed down to me, and my wish is for everyone to see each other as a family member. I wouldn't be as strong as I am if I didn't have someone to protect. And I have a lot to protect. Naruto finished and he slid his hand in hers briefly and he leapt into the trees. Hinata followed and they made their way back to the training field. Waiting for them was Sakura and Kakashi. Naruto, we have to report to the Hokage's office right away. There's been an attack on Sunagakure. Naruto's head shot up. Gaara. Sakura nodded and she started to walk, but she spoke back over her shoulder. Hinata can come too. We need all the help we can get. The four of them nodded and they dashed throughout the village streets until they reached the Hokage's residence. Tsunade was waiting for them in her office with Temari. Naruto, we need you to go to Sunagakure with Sakura, Kakashi and Hinata. Akatsuki has attacked the village and they've captured Gaara. Kankuro is suffering from a poison smoke bomb and Temari is here to give us the news. We need you to leave immediately. Team Guy will follow you once you've left. Naruto nodded. Wait for me, Gaara. We'll get you out of there. To Sunagakure. Naruto was stunned. Gaara, one of his dearest friends, captured by the Akatsuki. Hinata sidled up to him as they waited by the main gate for Kakashi. It would be the first time master and student would see each other in 2 years. Hinata stood close to Naruto's right side, Sakura to his left. It was an emergency mission. Sakura looked at her friends worriedly before she spoke to them. Naruto, Hinata, we'll make it through this. We'll save Gaara. Naruto was deep in his thoughts. Gaara is a lot like me. Of course the Akatsuki would go after him. But why now? We hadn't heard anything from them in over 3 years, at least according to the pervy sage. Hang on Gaara, we'll get you out of there. Naruto snapped his head up as Kakashi dropped down in front of them. All here. Good. Let's move. Kakashi quickly stopped and he formed 5 seals. Summoning jutsu. Kakashi slapped his palm down onto the ground and in a poof of smoke came a small brown dog that wore a blue vest. Pakun, we're going to need your help here. Can you keep your nose trained for anyone following us? The dog nodded and he spoke. You got it. Kakashi turned to Hinata. I know you're not used to working with me, Hinata, but we don't have a choice. I need you to keep an eye out for us at all times with your Byakugan. You're the only one we can rely on. Hinata nodded and she focused her chakra to her eyes and she popped the veins on her temples. I'm on it. Kakashi said nothing further and they started to race through the trees in the direction of Sunagakure. Naruto talked with Sakura and Hinata on the way. How long ago did word come from Sunagakure? Naruto had directed the question at Sakura. She was still distraught from the news herself. She had become fairly good friends with the Kazekage and his siblings. Temari was already in the village. Kankuro already fallen to the poison. Baki, their former teacher, had sent the Cage's personal falcon. It seems a man named Deidara was the one who attacked and defeated Gaara. The village is safe. Gaara was fighting to protect the village. Unfortunately, we know nothing of Akatsuki's whereabouts. All we know is they headed north upon Gaara's defeat. It is scary, isn't it? People with the power to overcome the power of Gaara. Naruto nodded and he sighed. I know Gaara well. He may have willingly surrendered to protect the village. I'd do the same if I were Hokage. If it meant protecting all of you, I'd die 1,000 times. No one will hurt my precious people. Sakura looked over at Hinata and both girls smiled. Now was as good a time as any, Sakura thought. Hinata sidled up to Naruto and she smiled. Naruto, I'm sure Gaara is okay. I've seen how strong you are. I'm sure Gaara is just as strong. We'll rescue him, so cheer up. Please, we all know you're hurting inside, but let us share your pain. Sakura and I are your friends. Kakashi smiled under his mask. He knew what they were doing. Pakun suddenly halted. Someone's coming. It's the Sunagaku girl. Temari, I believe. They halted in the trees as Temari landed on the branch across from them. We have a problem. Kankuro is suffering from the poison. We have to get Sakura to him immediately. We're still a few hours away, so the best we can do is pray he can hold out. It's a very strong poison that attacks the nervous system. Sakura gasped audibly. Neurotoxins. Those are difficult to counteract. I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. Temari nodded as they resumed their trek. After 4 hours they reached the entrance to Sunagaku. Temari led them into the Cage residence and she rushed to Kankuro's side. Her fallen brother was unconscious, but breathing. Temari allowed a single tear to rush down her cheek but she brushed it away. Sakura set her bag down by the doorway and she leaned over Kankuro. He'll be okay. It hasn't spread that far yet. I need a special herb though. Can you get me an emore leaf? Temari had always grown emore. She plucked a leaf off the plant by her windowsill and placed it into Sakura's hand. Sakura's hand began to glow a soft green and she ran her hand over Kankuro's forehead. Toxin removal jutsu. Sakura placed her hand onto the leaf and pressed her hand over Kankuro's forehead. The poison was drawn out of his system and Sakura threw the leaf into the trash. She wiped her forehead and she sighed. He should be okay, but he'll need to rest for a few days. Temari nodded and they all sat down in the meeting room to discuss their next move. They were seen headed north. It's all mountains and caves in that area. The hideout will be there. With Hinata's Byakugan, we should be able to find it easily. Everyone nodded. They called the meeting there. The mission would begin at dawn the next day. Naruto stayed behind, however, staring at the painting of Gaara. Hinata noticed Naruto standing there and she stood next to him. You really care for him? Naruto nodded and he smiled at her. Out of all my male friends, Gaara is my best friend. We have so much in common. We were both shunned by our own villages, branded as a demon. He never had anyone to befriend him though. I had you though, Hinata. I never realized it before, but I had you the whole time. Naruto turned to face her and she blushed while she looked into his sea blue eyes. When all the fighting is done, let's celebrate. When we put an end to Akatsuki, we'll be together more. I just don't want you to be hurt because of me. Hinata looked aside and she let a tear run down her cheek. I'd die for you, you know. Naruto, I love you. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and drew her close to him. Hinata felt giddy and she wrapped her arms around him back. I know you do. I realize that now. I love you for you, but right now, it's too risky. My enemies will use you to get to me. We'll have to be very cautious from now on. I don't want you getting hurt. Hinata sniffled into his chest and she nodded. I'll fight by your side. I don't want to lose you again. Please, just be there for me. If you can't be with me, just be there for me. I want to protect you in my own way, even if it means my life is forfeit. Naruto couldn't resist any longer. His heart had won. He lifted her chin and he softly pressed his lips against hers. Promise me you won't do anything foolish. He said to her. She nodded and she smiled at him with tears forming in her eyes. I promise. I won't lose you. Not again. Naruto nodded and he wrapped his arms around her. Stay by my side always, Naruto. Naruto nodded and she kissed him again. Preparation. Naruto stood with Hinata for a long time after they had shared their first kiss. Eventually, Sakura came and she smiled at the scene before her eyes. So it finally happened. Sorry to break you two apart, but I need you to come with me, Naruto. The council needs to speak with you about our rescue attempt. I'm sorry, Hinata. Hinata merely nodded and Naruto whispered to her. I'll be back as soon as I can. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze and he walked to Sakura's side. What do they need to talk to me about? Sakura shrugged and he nodded. Let's get this over with then. Naruto followed Sakura through the hallways and he stopped in front of the main doorway that led to the audience chamber. Enter, Naruto Uzumaki. Came a familiar voice. Naruto recognized the voice as Baki, the former teacher of Gaara, Temari and Kankuro. Naruto pushed the doors open and he stood before the council. Tell us what you know about Akatsuki. Naruto was taken aback. He didn't know all that much. I know little. I know that they're a group of extremely powerful shinobi that are bent on capturing all the tailed beasts for some unknown purpose. Even Jiraiya has no clue what their true goal is. But that's why they attacked the village. They're not after Gaara, they're after what's inside of him. Who was it that attacked the village? I need information on his fighting style if I'm supposed to defeat him. Baki sneered. Gaara couldn't defeat him and he is the case cage. How do you, a mere genin, expect to defeat him? Naruto looked down. He heard a voice behind him. Naruto never gives up. He can defeat anyone. Naruto turned around to see Hinata and Sakura there, both of them smiling. Behind them was Temari and a now recovered Kankuro. If we work together, we can defeat anyone. So please, tell us the shinobi's abilities. Baki looked at the rest of the council and he sighed. He's an explosive expert. He uses chakra to create mobile bombs. His name is Deidara. That's all we could deduce from his battle with Gaara. Gaara shielded the village with sand to soften the explosions. He willing gave himself up to save his home village. He's an admirable cage. So, do you have a rescue plan? He was accompanied by a former ninja of our very village, according to Kankuro. Sasori of the Red Sand, correct Kankuro? Kankuro was being supported by his sister and he nodded. Sasori was a student of the puppet master jutsu that I use. I was completely defeated. His skill is only matched by Chio, and he may be even better than her at this point. A withered voice came from the room's far corner. My Sasori did this to you. He hasn't changed a bit. He still loves his toys. I think I'll accompany you. You may need me along. Everyone turned to see an emaciated elderly woman seated on the far bench. Elder Chio, should you be going with them? At your age, we need you here too. Chio stood up and she started to make her way to Naruto. I was the one who sealed the Shukaku into Gaara, so it's only fitting I should help out, isn't that right, Kyuubi boy? Naruto looked offended by the comment but he said nothing. He knew that both he and Gaara had been shunned by their villages because of what they were. However, this woman before him was the cause of all of Gaara's suffering and misery. Help me save him, Chio Ba-chan. The old woman nodded and they started to turn. Baki called out to them however. They were last seen heading north from where Kankuro was found unconscious. There's nothing but mountains in that direction. They may very well be inside the mountain. Go prepared. I have received word from Tsunade that Team Guy will be arriving shortly. You are to go with them and rescue Gaara. This is an official S-rank mission. Please, on behalf of us all, rescue our leader. Baki bowed his head slightly and Naruto gave him a thumbs up. No worries. We'll get him out of there safe and sound. Don't worry about us. Worry about the person who pisses Gaara off. Naruto gave his big dopey grin and Hinata smiled warmly at her boyfriend. It felt like a dream. Naruto had kissed her. She had to grow stronger for them both. She couldn't be a liability here. Sakura slid an arm around Hinata and motioned for her to follow while Naruto was busy talking. I know what happened. He kissed you. You do realize that if you go public with Naruto, you will be targeted as well, right? Hinata nodded and she smiled. I've known that. If I can protect him, just once, I can die happy. Sakura shook her head and she sighed. Don't do anything reckless. Leave the big fights to Naruto, Lee, Neji, Tenten and the Junin. I know you love him, but you're no good to any of us dead Hinata. I've known for a long time that you love him, but I'm just saying this as a friend concerned for another friend, don't play the hero. Naruto is being hunted. They will use you to get to him. Always be wary of your surroundings, and keep your relationship a secret. Hinata nodded and she smiled again. I know. Naruto told me too. I just want to be by his side. That's all. I'm a shinobi, I was trained to fight and die. We all are. Sakura nodded. The girl's resolve was admirable. Naruto was coming back towards them. Team Guy had arrived just now. Mission time. Hinata, be careful. It was Neji who said this to his cousin. Naruto waited until Neji had turned his back and he slipped his hand into Hinata's. Promise me if something happens to me, you'll save yourself. I can't allow myself to be with you unless you promise me. Hinata smiled and she nodded. I promise. She said this with her lavender eyes closed. Naruto placed a soft kiss on her cheek and she blushed a soft red. It's time to go now, isn't it? She asked him and he nodded. Our first mission as a couple. Let's do a good job. Team Kakashi walked out the door into the village, followed by Team Guy. Pakun led the way from Gaara's scent, and they followed the scent all the way to a forest. A voice called out to them. Long time no see, Naruto, Kakashi. Before them stood Itachi Uchiha. Naruto snarled. Out of our way. We have no business with you. Itachi shook his head. You'll have to get through me first, Naruto. Kakashi stopped and he whispered. Something doesn't seem right. He doesn't have his Sharingan activated. Naruto looked closer and he nodded. You're right, but we have to defeat him. The battle begins. Naruto and his team stared Itachi Uchiha in his non-Sharingan eyes. Every time Naruto had seen him, he had always had his Sharingan activated. Something's not right. Kakashi edged closer and he drew a kunai from his waist pouch. Leave this one to me. I owe him for last time. Kakashi nodded and Naruto sighed. Be careful Kakashi-sensei. The rest of the group rushed back and into the trees to continue their journey towards the mountains. Kakashi sighed. He knew they could handle the mission without him. Where's the real Itachi? Itachi sighed and he shrugged. Nothing gets past the great Kakashi. I still can't let you pass here, since you sent the children away. Itachi brought his hands up into several seals and he took a deep breath before bringing his hands up in front of his face. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Itachi shot small balls of flame from his mouth, forcing Kakashi to dodge. Basic jutsu like that will not work on me. Kakashi had already prepared for the fight ahead of him. His headband was off his left eye and he was already forming seals of his own. He saw the lake behind Itachi and he smiled through his mask. If I can just lead him to the lake, I can end this fight swiftly. Kakashi raised his hands into a string of seals and he pulled his mask low. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Kakashi carefully controlled the amount of flame he used and he positioned himself between Itachi and the lake. Itachi could not dodge left or right due to the trees on both sides. He jumped backwards and he landed on the surface of the lake. Itachi sighed. Basic jutsu will not work on me either, Kakashi. Where Kakashi stood was now just a puff of smoke. What? A shadow clone. Itachi turned around and he saw Kakashi behind him. Water style. Water dragon jutsu. From the water rose a dragon shape and Itachi braced himself for the incoming blast. Itachi took the blast head on and he was thrown back against the nearest tree. Kakashi followed and he charged his hand for a lightning blade. This is the end, he said and he plunged his hand through Itachi's right lung, puncturing it, causing the Uchiha to splatter up blood. Itachi began to convulse and shake, and where Itachi's face was moments ago was now the face of a completely different man. I thought so. Kakashi said nothing further and he leapt into the trees, ready to pursue his advancing teammates. He summoned Pakun and he let the dog guide him to his team. Naruto and the others pushed forward until they reached their destination. When the trees gave way to the mountains, they were greeted by a welcome sight. Team Guy was waiting for them. Neji, Lee, Tenten and Guy were in the clearing ahead. All of them had tears in their clothing and marks on their face. Guy was breathing deeply. "Where's Kakashi?" Guy asked. As if in response to his question, Kakashi dropped down into the clearing. "Sorry about that. He was more trouble than he was worth. It looks like Akatsuki is even more dangerous than we thought. They can clone people and give them the host's abilities." Guy nodded. "We ran into some difficulty as well. I met Kisame on my way here. I barely managed to pull off a win, although I went a little overboard." Guy said this and he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Kakashi now noticed how exhausted he was. "How many?" Guy looked him in the eyes and he spoke frankly. 7. Kakashi went wide-eyed. "You leave the rest to us. If you push yourself, you could end up like Lee did years ago." Guy nodded and he sat down. "I know. It was kill or be killed, but I won, and everyone is safe. That's all that matters." Lee offered his shoulder to Guy, which he graciously accepted. Neji looked at Hinata. "Why are you here?" Hinata cast her eyes aside. She still could not stand up to her cousin. Naruto met Neji's gaze and he spoke to his friend. "Because we need her." Hinata blushed and she looked away, slightly embarrassed. "They needed a Hyuga, so I came along. But now since there's 2 of us, we'll be even more formidable." Neji did something he rarely did. He smiled. "Just be careful." Kakashi broke up the reunion and he sighed. "Sorry to break up the reunion, but have we tracked down their location?" Hinata snapped back to attention and she used her Byakugan. "They're inside the mountain, but it is guarded by some sort of huge boulder. I think we have to move that rock before we can get in and rescue the cage." Sakura stepped forward and she slipped a small glove onto her hand. "Leave it to me. Afterwards, follow in with a buttonhook entry." Sakura drew back her fist and she punched the boulder as hard as she could. At first, it simply splintered. But then it just cracked straight down the middle. As soon as Sakura had broken the boulder, an explosion to the right had Naruto, Kakashi and Hinata running towards it. A blonde man laughed. "Too bad it's just me and Sasori no Dana here. If you want the cage, you'll have to go through us first." A small hunched-over form creeped out from behind the now destroyed boulder. Sakura and Chio stepped forward with Tenten to face the other. "Neji, Lee, you're backup for Naruto and I." Everyone nodded. Naruto lunged at Deidara with a punch, which he easily dodged. "You'll have to do better, Kyuubi boy. You're next, once I defeat you." Kakashi stepped forward. "He's an explosives expert, Naruto. Just stay close to Hinata and leave this to me." Naruto hated playing second banana while others fought, but he didn't have a choice. "We'll back you up as best we can." The battle ends. Naruto and Hinata stayed out of the way while Kakashi faced off against Deidara. Deidara launched several small bombs at the other man and Kakashi sidestepped them. Naruto needed to do something, but what could he do? Hinata stood by her boyfriend, one arm wrapped around his and their fingers laced. Naruto was too absorbed in the battle to notice. He clung to her tightly and he cast his eyes at the ground. Kakashi had his Sharingan activated and he was holding a kunai in each hand. Deidara saw that Kakashi was about to attack and from his clay he formed a bird, mounted it and took off into the sky. It was at this point he saw Naruto and Hinata with their fingers laced. He chuckled and he swooped away. "So the Kyuubi boy has a lover. She'll make a fine treat." Naruto went white and he pulled his arm free. Kakashi was already moving and Naruto followed quickly. Naruto threw several shuriken at the bird and he watched they hit and were absorbed into the mass of the bird. "What the hell? How are we supposed to get this guy when he's that high up?" Kakashi was moving as fast as he could and he had his hands into the tiger seal. "Give me some time, Naruto. I need to build some chakra to finish him. Stay close to Hinata. If I don't defeat and kill him, your secret is out." "That was your biggest fear, was it not?" Naruto clenched his teeth and sighed heavily. "Come back to us safely, Kakashi-sensei." Naruto turned and he ran back to where Hinata was. She hadn't followed him. She knew that she would only be in the way. When Naruto reached her, he scooped her up into his arms and he carried her away from the battle. Hinata, our secret is out now. We have to be extremely careful. Anyone and everyone could be an enemy. I do not want you to be hurt because of what I am. I want you to be happy and safe. Do you still want to be with me? Hinata nodded and she wrapped her arms around his neck. Do you even have to ask? I'd gladly put my life on the line for you. Of course I want to be with you. Do you think we should go check on Sakura? Naruto had completely forgotten about his teammate in the confusion of the confrontation with Deidara. He nodded his head fervently and Guy stopped him with Neji and Tenten in tow. Guy was looking much better now and he looked around the small clearing. Where's Kakashi? Naruto pointed to the canyon and Guy took off. He was going to offer backup to Kakashi. Neji and Tenten waited with their friends. How's Sakura? Tenten asked of Neji. Neji brought his hands up into the ram seal and activated his Byakugan. From what I can see, the battle's already over. Sakura and Chio managed to defeat Sasori of the Red Sand, and they're bringing Gaara's body back. I'm sorry Naruto. It looks like he's gone. Naruto dropped to his knees and he shook his head. No, there's no way he's dead. Not Gaara. First the old man dies and then Sasuke leaves. Now Gaara is dead. This cannot be happening. Tears were streaming down his face. Neji and Tenten said nothing as Hinata wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck from behind and she kissed his cheek. I don't know how hard it must be for you to lose someone you cared about. I never have experienced death. But if it helps you any, I'll be here with you until everything is all better. Naruto laced his hands with hers and Hinata smiled. Thank you Hinata. Sakura and Chio were now with them. Sakura was carrying Gaara's lifeless body and she laid him down on the ground. He had a very peaceful expression on his face. Chio sat down next to him and she spoke. Kyuubi boy, no, Naruto, could you carry him back to the border of the sand village? We'll do this there. Naruto gently disentangled himself from Hinata's loving embrace and he picked up Gaara over his shoulders and they began to walk. After about an hour, Kakashi and Guy caught up to them. Kakashi was riding piggyback on Guy. Sakura had a worried expression on her face. Is he okay? Is there anything I can do? Kakashi shook his head and he closed his eyes. I just went a little overboard. I just need rest. Kakashi then fell into a deep slumber and Guy sighed. He used his Mangekyo Sharingan to blow off Deidara's arm. It was the best he could do. The company then walked in silence until they reached the end of the forest. Chio called a halt in the march and she turned to Naruto. Come lay him out here. Naruto did as he was asked and he laid Gaara down on his back. Chio brought her hands up to rest on Gaara's chest and her hands began to emit a soft green light. From the direction of the village came Lee with Temari and Kankuro. When Temari saw her brother's lifeless body she immediately dropped her tough girl exterior and she cried true tears for her brother. Kankuro knelt by his brother's body and he lowered his head in prayer. Chio eventually shook her head. It's no good. I don't have enough chakra left to revive him. Naruto placed his hands over hers. Can you use mine? Gaara was a dear friend of mine. Chio smiled and she tried again, this time with Naruto's added power. After a few minutes Gaara's eyes opened and he sat up slowly, only to fall back down. What happened? Naruto. Temari. Kankuro. Why the sad faces? Temari broke down completely and she hugged her youngest brother. Naruto gave a soft smile and Sakura and Hinata broke down too, crying to see the family reunited. Elder Chio revived you. You should thank her. I only lent my chakra to perform the jutsu. Naruto cast his eyes back at Chio and he saw that she had her eyes closed and she was not breathing. Elder Chio. Sakura shook her head and she wiped her eyes dry. That was a forbidden jutsu Naruto. It revives one person at the cost of the user's life. She's dead. She sacrificed herself for Gaara. Naruto sighed. We need to get Gaara back to the village so he can rest. That should be our main priority. Sakura, can you carry Chio's body back to Suna? I'll carry Gaara. Naruto picked Gaara up over his shoulder and the cage smiled at his friend. Thank you, Naruto. Naruto smiled back and he laughed. We're friends. This is what I do for my precious people. They walked in silence until they reached the gates of Suna. Baki was waiting there for them, and when he saw Chio's body, he called the village out to pay their respects. Everyone, please say a final prayer in regards to Elder Chio. A mournful cry went up and Sakura carried Chio's body past the congregation and they carried her to a building where her body would be prepared for burial. Everyone else went to the cage manor. Gaara had regained the use of his legs and he walked on his own now. I want to thank you all for coming to my rescue. I know it is selfish for me to ask, but please, stay for the funeral. Gaara said to his friends and family. They all nodded. The funeral will be tomorrow. Please rest and relax here in the mansion until then. Naruto, thank you once again. Naruto smiled his big grin at Gaara and he held his hand out, which Gaara took and shook in his own. It is not a problem, my friend. Hinata smiled at her lover and she whispered to him. Can we go somewhere alone? Naruto nodded and he smiled. Of course. Naruto took her by the hand and they exited the room, and she leaned up to kiss him, happy to have such a strong and courageous young man all to herself. Love and life. Naruto and Hinata retired to their room as soon as the cage had dismissed them. Naruto was tired from the mission but surprisingly still quite active. Hinata had removed her long jacket and sat in her mesh undershirt. She was not timid around Naruto anymore. They had grown closer on their mission together, and even though their secret was now out, they still loved each other. Naruto held his arms open and his lover scooted closer to him and she lay wrapped in his arms. Naruto nuzzled her neck and he kissed it, earning a giggle and a kiss from Hinata. Hey, you love me, right? Hinata asked and he smiled at her. Do you have to ask me? Hinata nodded and she kissed him a little, sliding her tongue into his mouth, causing the blonde to go wide-eyed. I need to hear it sometimes. Naruto kissed her back and she blushed. I love you, Hinata Hyuga. Where are you going with this? The shy young woman placed her hands on her thighs and she drew her shirt off her body and she laid back against him, her black lace bra digging into his skin. Naruto gasped and he wrapped his arms around her, gently cupping her S in his hands. Hinata blushed and she smiled at him. Make love to me, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto was taken aback and he tightened his grip on her. Hinata, why so suddenly are you like this? Hinata turned around to face him and she looked into his cerulean blue eyes. Do you know the mental preparation I had to go through to get to this point? I want you. I have always wanted you. Why won't you? She pleaded with him and she ran her slender hands up to cup both his cheeks. Naruto was fighting an internal battle with himself, and his instincts were winning. I will then. Just I don't want to get you pregnant. Hinata nuzzled his neck and chest with her nose and she nipped the skin of his neck. She then trailed her lips up to kiss his cheek and she whispered into his ear. It's alright. I won't. I can't. I can set up a chakra barrier inside of myself to stop anything from reaching my egg. Please, Naruto, don't make me beg you. Naruto had lost the battle within himself and he finally relented. Alright, let's do it, he said with a soft smile and he nuzzled her neck. Hinata reached behind her back and she unclipped her bra and tossed it aside and she let her long raven hair cover her S. Like a wraith, she brushed her hair behind her, giving Naruto a long good look at her. The young male's heart began to race and she smiled at him. She could tell that she had him in her power. Hinata took her hand in his and she laid it over her own heart. Can you feel the way my heart beats when I'm around you? Can you feel how much I want you? Naruto lost his self-control then and he trailed his hand down to feel her warm S. Hinata gasped and she smiled softly. Hinata pulled back for a moment and she slipped out of the rest of what she was wearing and Naruto did the same. He was fully erect and ready for her. Hinata smiled at him and she sat on his chest and she kissed him. Naruto kissed her back and he slipped his arms around her waist. Hinata shook her head and she moved off of him so she could slip her mouth over his long erect shaft. Naruto cried out when she placed her warm lips over the head. Hinata. He gasped and Hinata looked up at him, her lavender eyes meeting his sky blue. Then it began. Hinata's head bobbed up and down and Naruto threw his head to the side, thrashing like a wild beast in sheer ecstasy. Hinata watched him and she saw that he was enjoying it. Naruto threw his head back and he cried out loudly. Hinata. She smiled at him and she stopped momentarily. It's okay. Just go with it. He nodded and he closed his eyes as he released himself into her mouth, causing the young woman to pull back. Hinata smiled at him and she swallowed what was in her mouth and she lay next to him, her head on his strong chest. How was that? Naruto was breathing deeply and he smiled at her and he rewarded her with a soft kiss to her cheek. That was intense. Can you wait a few minutes for me to get ready? She nodded and she brought her hand around to caress his cheek. Naruto nuzzled her and he kissed her cheek again. He grew back to full length after a few moments and Hinata rolled away and she lay on her back, legs spread gently and Naruto took his cue. Hinata began to form several seals and she nodded at him. I'm ready for you. The barrier is in place. It's my first time, so please be gentle. Naruto nodded and he gently placed the head of his shaft over her sleek wet entrance and she nodded. Naruto entered and he felt her shudder. A sharp cry of pain went up from her lips and she felt tears sting her eyes. A few moments later, Naruto was kissing her lips softly to ensure her that he would be gentle. He began to gently thrust inside of her, feeling her warmth surround him. Hinata was more at ease now and she felt the pain subside, and the pain was replaced by a sensation she had never felt before. It was pleasurable as well as warm. Naruto smiled down at her and he stroked her long raven hair and Hinata arched her back for him and she wrapped her legs around his strong waist. Naruto cried out every few moments, feeling very pleased and satisfied. Hinata could feel a building feeling in her thighs and she cried out softly to her lover. Faster. She whispered and Naruto sped his pace. He could also feel it building inside of his own thighs and he gasped loudly. Hinata. He whimpered and Hinata smiled up at him. Go ahead. It's okay. Hinata was at her breaking point and she gasped loudly. With a cry from both lovers, the pair released their built-up tension. Hinata felt her insides quiver and she felt Naruto release inside of her vagina. Naruto lowered his head onto her chest and he closed his eyes, exhausted and tired from a double release. Naruto pulled out of her and she scooted close to him. I love you, Hinata. Naruto kissed her and he closed his eyes and he fell asleep. Hinata whispered back to him and she also slept. Night had fallen on the village. Naruto and Hinata slept very comfortably together after their first time and they slept until morning, the day of the funeral for Elder Chiyo. The long road home. Night came and went after the two young shinobi had done their business. Naruto rose with the sun in his eyes. It was already warm in the village. A knock came at the door and Hinata opened her lavender eyes and she wrapped the blanket around her body. Naruto, the funeral is in 3 minutes. Are you ready? Naruto recognized the voice as Kankuro's. Naruto was already dressing in his funeral attire, the same clothes he had worn years before at the funeral of the third Hokage. Hinata took her cue and she began to dress as well. Naruto called out to the Kage's brother and he opened the door as soon as Hinata was dressed. We're ready. Kankuro nodded and he walked with them into the great hall, where the village had gathered. Gaara was dressed in his Kage robes and he had a very solemn look on his face. Naruto sat in the front row with the rest of his friends. Sakura was already in tears. She had fought hard as she could with Chiyo and the two had bonded in the fight. Sakura sat next to Tenten and Neji. Tenten was calm and reserved, but her eyes were wet with tears. Neji and Lee were both present, their faces stoic. Guy and Kakashi were standing on the opposite sides of Gaara. Gaara eventually stood up and looked at the congregation before he spoke. We are here to pay our final respects to Elder Chiyo. She gave her life to save my own. She has done this village a great service, and her sacrifice will not have been in vain. She fought hard as she could with my friend Sakura, and she defeated a member of Akatsuki, the former ninja of our village, Sasori of the Red Sand. Sakura, if you would like to say a few words. Sakura stood up. Her normally calm face was soaked with sadness and tears. Sakura made her way to the podium and she fought back the tears and she regained her composure as best as she could. She managed to stop crying and she spoke in a very soft voice. I didn't know Elder Chio for very long, but while we fought against Sasori, I realized how strong she was. She was the one who sealed the Shukaku into Gaara while he was still in the womb. She suffered in silence for a long time. She was a strong woman, a strong shinobi and a very strong and selfless person. She gave her life to save the life of Gaara, and I don't think anyone else would have, or could have, done what she did. She was a true shinobi, and her memory will never be forgotten. Konoha and Suna will both be bound by the blood of Elder Chio. Sakura finished her eulogy and she sat down next to Naruto. Hinata was in tears as well and she had her head on his strong shoulders. Gaara looked to Naruto and the young blonde shinobi stood up. He walked to the podium and looked at everyone, and a single tear flowed down his cheek before he spoke. Elder Chio was a powerful fighter. She taught me that you can be strong even in death. I really didn't know her very well, so I can't say much about her. But she died an honorable death. There is nothing more honorable for dying for your beliefs, and I know she entrusted the future of Suna to Gaara. I firmly believe this. The crowd gave a round of applause and Gaara took the podium once more. Kankuro, Baki, and 2 other men brought the casket into the room. It was opened and each person placed a desert rose into the coffin. The casket was closed and Gaara took the place of one of the other 2 men, and he motioned for Naruto to take the 4th position. Naruto gripped the casket and he walked with the other 3 men into the graveyard. They laid the casket into the earth and they began to fill the grave with sand. When they were finished, Gaara turned to his friend and he gave a rare smile. Naruto, thank you for everything. If it were not for you, I wouldn't be standing now. If something ever happens to Konoha, you have my word I'll be there as soon as I can. I guess you have to be heading home now, don't you? I will miss you, my friend. Gaara said and he held his hand out. Naruto took it in his own and he clasped it firmly. Anytime you need me, Gaara, I will be here in a heartbeat. Take care, my friend. You will be missed as well. Gaara smiled back at Naruto and they embraced each other briefly. Temari was smiling and Kankuro snickered but kept smiling. Naruto smiled and he turned to his friends. Let's go home, he said and he took Hinata by the hand and he looked into her eyes. Guy and Kakashi waved and the company began the long march back to their own village. The trip back to Konoha was uneventful until they reached the front gates. Upon reaching the main gates of Konoha, the company came to a halt. Kakashi took command and he spoke. We need to go and report to the Hokage. After our report is done, you're free to do as you please. Naruto, a word, alone. Hinata, can you go to the Hokage residence without us? Hinata nodded and she started to walk with Guy's team. Kakashi looked at Naruto and he closed his eyes. This isn't easy for me to say. Your father isn't around to tell you this, so it falls to me to do so. I know you love her and I know she loves you. Just promise me you won't do anything rash. You're young and in love, I just want you to exercise caution. Remember, you're the container for the 9-tailed fox. There are enemies in every shadow. There are people who will use Hinata to get to you. My advice is simple. Stay close to her. I want her to start living with you. Naruto went wide-eyed and he started to sweat. Her father will kill me if we do that. Kakashi shook his head. Hiashi has no say. He disowned her. Technically, Kurenai is her guardian if her father does that, and this was Kurenai's idea. Naruto nodded and he grit his teeth. Fine. But you're the one who's going to tell her with me. This is major. Kakashi smiled inside his mask and he nodded. He motioned for Naruto to follow and they began to walk to the Hokage residence. The rest of the team was already inside the building. Naruto and Kakashi entered and they stood at attention in front of the Hokage. Well, from what Guy tells me, your mission was successful with only a single casualty. Well done. You'll receive your pay soon, and you get a bonus for defeating Sasori. Until the next mission, you're on standby. Rest yourselves well and enjoy your time off. Tsunade finished her speech and they were dismissed. Everyone went their separate ways and only Tsunade, Kakashi, Naruto and Hinata remained. Tsunade stood up and started towards the window and she spoke with her back turned. Kakashi, you've told him correct. Hinata, starting today, you'll be living with Naruto. Hinata's eyes went wide and she looked at Naruto. What? When was this decided? She looked at Naruto and he shrugged. I just found out myself. Apparently, it was Kurenai's idea. Hinata nodded and she wrapped her arms around her lover and he hugged her back in return. Tsunade turned around and she looked at them both. Good. Now that it's been decided, Naruto, Hinata, go to your home. Naruto, watch her carefully. Trust no one outside this village. There are people who will use Hinata to get to you. Now go. I need to have a word with Kakashi. Naruto and Hinata left the building and they walked towards Ichiraku Ramen. Hinata turned to him and she smiled. Want to grab some dinner before we go home? Naruto nodded and they pushed the curtains open and the owner and his daughter welcomed them. On Naruto and Hinata. Back from your mission. Naruto nodded and flashed his big grin. One bowl of miso pork. We're splitting tonight. Hinata smiled and took a seat next to him. A small soft smile crossed her lips and she whispered to him. Hey, feed me tonight, and I'll feed you. Naruto slipped his hand into hers and he nodded. Sounds really good. Their food came and Naruto and Hinata both broke their chopsticks and they began to feed each other until the food was gone. They were both full and satisfied and they shared a kiss before they paid for their food and they strolled hand in hand to Naruto's apartment. He unlocked the door and he sat on what was now their bed. Hinata sat next to him and she smiled gently, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. Naruto wrapped his arms around her and he gave her a gentle kiss on her neck. Hinata responded by nuzzling her nose against his and they rolled up in a ball and went to sleep, ready to welcome their first day together. Picnic for 8 and sisters reunited. The sun rose over the horizon and it hit the village of Konoha, in all its glory. The sun was in the sky before Hinata was awake. Her body ached from the mission and she eased out of bed. She stood up and made her way to the kitchen and she opened the refrigerator, which was full of food. Naruto had been eating healthier recently and she smiled as she cast a glance back at her lover. He's really grown up, she thought to herself. Naruto was still deep asleep and she made herself a plate of bacon and eggs. As she ate, many thoughts ran through her mind. She thought of Naruto and her, and of their passionate night. She thought of how they had rescued Gaara and how close Naruto had become to everyone. The day wore on and Naruto finally awoke around noon. Hinata smiled and she kissed him. You're finally awake. It's almost noon, she said and Naruto sat up before speaking. Sorry I slept so late. I was exhausted from the mission. Hinata sat on the edge of the bed and she shook her head and her long raven hair fell to her shoulders. We should go out and do something today, Hinata said and Naruto rolled out of the bed, quickly made it up and he dressed. Well, we can always train, but that's not very much fun. I'm curious. What would you like to do today, Hinata? Hinata also dressed and she moved close to him and she hugged him. I want to go to the lake with you and a few of our friends. Naruto nodded and he dug his swimming trunks out of the drawer and he nodded. Who should we invite? Hinata put her finger to her lips and she thought for a moment before she spoke. Sakura, Lee, Neji and Tenten. Naruto nodded and he hugged her. Sounds good to me, Hinata. Shall we go, my Haim? Hinata blushed when Naruto called her Haim. Naruto, why did you call me Haim? He looked away and he shrugged. Because you're heiress to one of the most powerful clans in the village, and because I think of you as my princess, since I'm going to be Hokage one day. Hinata's blush faded and she moved to hug him from behind and he smiled. That's so sweet of you. Naruto laid his hands over hers and he smiled. Glad you like it. Come on, let's get going. Today is already half over. Hinata kissed his cheek and they walked out of the apartment, locking the door behind them. Once on the street, they were greeted by various people. Almost immediately they were spotted by Neji and Tenten. Neji nodded at them both and he approached, holding Tenten by the hand. You two look happy. Where are you headed off to? Hinata smiled and she nodded. We are happy. We were heading to the lake. Would you like to come with us? Tenten giggled and she nodded. We were just headed there ourselves, weren't we, Neji? The older Hyuga nodded and a soft smile crossed his lips. We were actually going to meet Lee and Sakura there. They said they had an announcement to make. The four of them nodded and started towards the village gates. They passed through the gates and then they turned into the forest. The lake was located just inside the forest, in a clearing where flowers of all kinds bloomed. It was originally found by Ino, and the news had spread to all of the other members of the Konoha 12. The four young shinobi reached the lake several minutes after they had entered the forest and they smiled at what they seen. It was a truly beautiful sight, to see such a pristine lake in the middle of a forest clearing. Hey guys, over here, came the voice of Sakura. She was sitting on the edge of the lake next to Rock Lee, both of them hand in hand with their feet dipped into the cool water. So this was your announcement? Muttered Neji. The two of them stood up and they smiled. Yeah, Sakura finally said yes to me. We are officially a couple now, just like you guys. I've never been happier. Sakura smiled and they chuckled. I can't believe I never noticed how much of a great guy Lee is. I was always so hung up on Sasuke. But now, I can move on and be happy. They all nodded and they say on the grass. By Sakura's feet was a basket and a blanket. I'm glad you could all come. We were going to have a picnic, but it's no fun with only two people. Naruto helped Lee and Neji roll out the blanket while the ladies unpacked the basket. A feast was laid out for the six of them. Naruto's eyes went wide and he looked at them all. There's more food here than I think Choji could eat. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Ino or Choji since we returned. I wish they could join us. As if on command, Ino Yamanaka and Choji Akamichi walked into the clearing, hand in hand. Choji wanted to swim, so here we are. Ooh, a picnic. Let's eat. Now there were 10 of them. They sat and talked about various things while they ate, mainly about their respective missions and what they had been up to. Suddenly the conversation turned to focus on Naruto's 3-year absence. Hinata looked at her boyfriend and she nuzzled his shoulder. I'm curious too. Tell us about your training. Naruto nodded and he smiled. Well, Jiraiya pretty much retrained me. We started from the basics and worked up from there. I have a better understanding of genjutsu and how to spot it, but I'm nowhere near as good as Sakura. My taijutsu has improved, but I'm nowhere near as proficient as Lee. My ability to control chakra has improved and I can now use the Rasengan one-handed, without a shadow clone. Pretty much I've just improved on my weak points and made my strengths much better. He finished talking and everyone was silent. Most of us here know you're strong, Naruto. You managed to defeat me in the finals of the Chunin exam. I think you've always been strong. Neji said quietly. 3 years ago Naruto had defeated Neji in the Chunin exams, and Neji had taken the loss well. He had improved himself further and he secretly wanted a friendly rematch. Naruto smiled at his friends. Each of us is strong in one way or another. Strength doesn't only come from brute force. It comes from the heart. Hinata nodded and so did everyone else. Naruto, you've really grown up. I know you better than most people. You're really grown up. Sakura said and she smiled. Well, now that we've eaten, let's swim. Said the eager Ino. Everyone had their swim suits on underneath their normal clothes and they hopped into the lake. Lee was floating on his back and Sakura belly flopped onto him. Neji chuckled and he picked Tenten up on his shoulders. Chicken fight battle royale. Each of the men picked their partners onto their shoulders and they all rushed at each other, trying to knock each other down. Ino went down first after Tenten pulled her leg. Sakura was down next as Hinata pushed her backwards. All that was left was Hinata and Tenten. Naruto and Neji circled each other. Hinata lunged by Neji sidestepped the blow and Tenten caught Hinata's arm and pulled her down. Tenten laughed and she thrust her arm into the air. Victory. Neji smiled and he tossed her into the air and caught her in his arms. They kissed and everyone laughed. That was a lot of fun. Naruto said and they all swam for a while longer. They all climbed out of the water and dressed again, and Neji took Naruto aside. I've never seen my cousin this happy. Between you and I, Hiyashi is furious that she's living with you. Keep her safe, Naruto. I love her as much as you do. And if you see Hiyashi, don't let him intimidate you. By law, Hinata is not his daughter anymore, said the elder Hyuga to the blonde ninja. Naruto nodded and he smiled. I won't let her be unhappy or let her be harmed. And Hiyashi can shove it. Neji nodded and he smiled. Every went their separate ways and Naruto and Hinata returned to their apartment. Waiting for them was Kurenai Uehi. You guys look like you had fun. Naruto, Tsunade needs to talk to you and Hinata, right away. Naruto nodded and the three of them entered the Hokage Tower. Tsunade was talking with Shizune when they entered. Naruto, glad you came. I have some rather bad news for you. Naruto gripped Hinata's hand, and he nodded, telling her to go on. Well, I'll make this simple. Kakashi is in the hospital. Naruto was shocked and he balled his fist. Who's strong enough to hospitalize Kakashi? Tsunade looked at Hinata and then she looked away. Hiyashi Hyuga sneak attacked Kakashi and several other Junin while you were at the lake with your friends. Jiraiya stepped in and he fled. We have shinobi pursuing him. Hiyashi fled the village. Hinata stepped forward after hearing this. Where's my sister? Tsunade smiled thinly. She's with Asuma right now. We need you and Naruto to look after her until we can find someone to look after her. Right now your father is a missing nin. He's to be captured and brought back for trial. Hinata then broke down in tears and Naruto held her in his arms. We'll look after her. He did this because of me, didn't he, Tsunade? Tsunade nodded and she sighed. Just take care of them both, Naruto. They're going through a hard time. Naruto nodded and Tsunade dismissed them. I'll have Asuma bring Hanabi by soon. Go home and wait for her. Naruto nodded and they went back to their apartment. He laid with Hinata on the bed and he held her, stroking her long raven hair. Everything will be okay. I won't let you go until you're better. Hinata buried her face in his chest and a knock came at the door. Naruto, it's Asuma. Naruto nodded and he opened the door. Hanabi was now 11, and she looked much like her sister. She was a strong girl and she carried a bag with her. Asuma tapped his forehead and laughed. Good luck, Naruto. This is only temporary. Naruto flashed his bug grin and he closed the door behind Hanabi. The younger Hyuga sat on the bed with her sister and she stroked Hinata's hair. Hanabi, I'm glad you're here. Hinata said and she hugged her baby sister. Hanabi hugged her back and she smiled. We're family. This is what we do. Naruto leaned against the wall and he smiled. Yes. This is family. Hanabi nodded. She laid down and she fell asleep. Taking a cue, Hinata also fell asleep. The sun had set and Naruto rolled up next to Hinata and fell asleep. This was only their first day as a couple living together. As Naruto fell asleep, he wondered what the next day had in store for them all. Athers, Part 1. The sun rose over the village of Konoha once more. Naruto slept very little that night. He was not used to sleeping in a bed with three people. He rose early while the sisters slept. He dressed in his usual attire and he went out for a job around the village. He left a note for Hinata that simply said, went out on a jog. Be back soon, love Naruto. As the blonde shinobi jogged, he thought of many things. So much had happened in the last few weeks that he was starting to lose himself. He had come home from his training and he fell in love with Hinata. Then he was called away to save Gaara. Now he returns to find Hiyashi had attacked his mentor and his friend, Kakashi Hatake. Not to mention the man had disowned his elder daughter because of him and now he has hurt his younger daughter. As the last thought, he stopped his jog. He was suddenly angry. He balled his fist and he slammed it into the wall, causing the wood to splinter. Damn it. It took me this long to realize all the things that bastard has done to both his daughters. Some guy the first I need to find him and then sort things out. He said and he continued to run. He wanted to make Hiyashi pay for all he had done to both Hinata and to Hanabi. He continued to run, and he finally reached his home. He unlocked the door and entered, only to see Hinata and Hanabi sharing a meal of fried sausage and cinnamon buns. Hinata smiled and she went to hug him. How was your run? She asked him and he hugged her back gently. It was fine. I just needed to think. Can we talk alone? Hinata nodded and she took him by the hand and stepped outside, closing the door behind her. What's wrong, Naruto? You seem angry. I hope I didn't do anything wrong. Naruto hugged her and he shook his head. It wasn't you, Haim. It's your father. It took me this long to realize how badly he treated you. I'm really sorry for not noticing sooner. He opened his mouth to go on, but Hinata shook her head and she put a finger to his lips, to tell him it was okay. It's okay, Naruto. That's in the past, what he did to me. Naruto shook his head and he sighed. What about your poor sister? She's in pain, I can see it. I'm going to see Tsunade about this. I'm going to ask Tsunade if you, Kiba, Shino and I can track him. Hinata put her arms around his neck and she nuzzled his cheek with her nose. It's okay. We don't need to track him. Asuma and Kurenai came by while you were out. He's been found and captured. Tsunade wants you, Hanabi and I to talk to him. He has some things to say to us all. We're supposed to go to the tower at 10 a.m. Naruto nodded and he grit his teeth. Fine, but I have some things to ask him too. Hinata kissed her boyfriend and they went back inside, where Hanabi was washing the dishes. Naruto put on a tense smile and he helped her put the dishes away. Thank you, Hanabi. You're very reliable, just like your sister. Hanabi flashed a big smile and she nodded. You're a good brother. Naruto put his hand behind his head and he laughed. Brother. That has a nice ring to it. I always wanted a little sister. Hanabi smiled and she looked up at the clock. We should be going soon. Hinata said when she met her sister's gaze. The three of them walked out of the apartment and into the main street after Naruto locked the door with his key. They started to walk towards the tower and Naruto passed by the wall where he splintered the wood. I'll have to fix that, he said and he laughed. Hinata giggled with Hanabi. You're really strong, brother, Hanabi said to Naruto. The younger Hyuga, like her sister and cousin Neji, had completely accepted Naruto. Naruto was still getting used to being with both sisters, but he welcomed it. He loved everyone in the village, even Hiashi. His dream was to be Hokage. He loved the village and everyone in it. Even if some villagers still hated him, he was determined to win them over. He wanted to be the village hero. His thoughts were disrupted by them reaching their destination. We're here. Let's get this over with. Naruto whispered and he pushed the wide double doors open for the sisters and they entered. Tsunade was waiting for them and she let them into her office. Hiashi was waiting for them, standing in full Hyuga robes. When he saw Naruto with both his daughters, his brow furrowed and he activated his bloodline trait and he spoke with a voice full of malice. You bastard. First you take my elder daughter and corrupt her, and now you take my precious Hanabi too. You're lucky Jiraiya is your teacher or I would flay the flesh from your bones. Naruto shook his head and he took a seat across from Hiashi. Tsunade had called this meeting, but no one but Tsunade knew why. Naruto looked over at the Hokage and he sighed. We're here like you asked. What is this all about? Tsunade peered at them both through folded hands and she spoke. Hiashi claims you forced Hinata to go with you. I'm here to get to the bottom of this matter. Hiashi is already a criminal and will serve time in the prison. However, he has told me why he opposes you being with his daughters. His reasons are valid, but I want you to hear them for yourself. Naruto nodded and he spoke next. That's fine, but then I want him to hear my side. Agreed. Hiashi scoffed and he spat at Naruto. How dare you demand I agree to your terms? Tsunade raised her hand and Hiashi calmed down. I'm the mediator here. I'll be the one who decides what happens. Hiashi, you go first. Naruto, just hold your anger and rage in. I assure you, he's just a concerned father. Hiashi gave a slight huff of disapproval and he began to speak. You, boy, are simply not fit to be the lover of a Hyuga. You're demon scum and your father was no better. He sealed the Kyuubi into you and then he died. We lost so many of our clan in the battle to fight the fox. My wife died during that battle. I blame you because you're just like Minato was. A pompous brat. That's all you are. You have no talent as a shinobi, even if you are the son of the fourth Hokage. Naruto was shocked to hear those words. You knew my father. Why did no one tell me these things? All my life I wanted to meet him, to talk to him. Hiashi, you hate me because of my father. I'm not my dad. You have no right to blame me for anything he did. It's not my fault the Kyuubi killed your wife. Hiyashi's next move happened in less than a second. He sprang forward and had Naruto by the shirt. You don't tell me what to do, boy. I hate you, your father, and everything he stood for. In the world of a shinobi, only power matters. Your lover, my elder daughter, has no power. She's too soft. That's why her sister is the heir to the clan in her place. The next thing that was heard was a large crash. Naruto had punched Hiashi in the face and knocked him onto his back. Naruto was on top of him with his hands ready to strike again. Tsunade was already trying to hold him back. Naruto struggled, but Tsunade restrained him. Let me go. This bastard is no father. He's a monster. He disowned Hinata, injured Kakashi and several other Junin with a sneak attack, and now his actions have put Hanabi in a bad situation. I'll never forgive you, Hiashi. He said, and he managed to deliver one shattering punch to Hiyashi's face before he gave up his struggling. Hiashi merely laughed. Yes, that's the power of the demon. Your rage could be your saving grace, boy. Naruto shook his head and he cast a look back at Hinata and Hanabi. I'm sorry, but he deserves a lot more than that. I'll let the system take its toll on him. Are we done here, Tsunade? He asked, and Tsunade nodded. I'm sorry things didn't work out. Naruto was already walking out the door and he nodded. Hinata was running after him and Hanabi was hugging her father. She was still too young to understand the complexity of the situation. She spoke to her father and kissed his cheek. Sorry, but you're not my father anymore. I'm going with Hina and brother Naruto. Goodbye. She said, and she ran after Naruto and Hinata. Tsunade smiled. See what your pride has wrought you. You lost both your daughters today. I think Naruto was right. You're nothing but a bastard. Genma, Katetsu, escort him to his new home. Tsunade sat back down and she wept silent tears after the three men had exited. Her attendant, Shizune, put her hand on Tsunade's shoulder. I saw it all. Naruto took that pretty hard, learning about his father like that. We need to tell him the truth, Lady Tsunade. Tsunade nodded and she smiled weakly. Some other time. For now, let him be alone. I'll have Jiraiya talk to him soon. Naruto was already on the streets before Hinata and Hanabi had caught up with him. Hinata was wary of him, but she gently slid her hand into his. He turned to her and he looked into her eyes. I'm sorry for what I did. He deserves a lot more than that. Hinata nodded and she kissed his cheek. I know. He put me through hell. He always trained Hanabi until she couldn't even stand anymore. He deserves what he gets. Hanabi was staying silent and she sighed. I don't blame you either. Was all she said, and she remained silent. They passed by the barbecue restaurant that Choji loved so much and Naruto smiled. What say we eat here? I'm hungry. The two sisters smiled and they nodded. Sounds great, Hinata said, and they entered the restaurant. They took a booth by the window and they smiled and ate happily together. Naruto wondered if this is what it was like to have a family. He thought about what he had heard about his father being the fourth. He wanted to meet his father, just to talk to the man who was described as the strongest shinobi the village of Konohagakure had ever produced. Naruto smiled and he held Hinata's hand, thinking what it would be like to be a father one day. Fathers, Part 2. Naruto, Hinata and Hanabi sat in the restaurant and ate together happily. Despite the events of earlier, Naruto was in high spirits. He was beaming as he ate the barbecued meat with his girlfriend and his new little sister. Nothing could ruin this moment for him. Then a familiar voice rang in his ears. Ah, Naruto. Welcome home. Naruto turned his head and he looked up into the perpetually stoic faces of Shikamaru, Nara and Tamari. Naruto gave his big grin and he laughed. Shikamaru. Tamari. He said and he chuckled. You two look happy together. Said the blonde ninja and everyone laughed. Temari was making no efforts to hide her presence. She gripped Shikamaru by the hand and they all laughed. We are. Naruto, I just wanted to thank you again for what you did for me, for all of Sunagakur. If it weren't for you, we would have lost my baby brother. Thank you. Temari said and Naruto put his hands behind his head. I would have come even if it wasn't a mission. Gaara, Kankuro, you're all my friends, my precious people. I would have done that for you or Kankuro too. Temari chuckled and she brushed her hair out of her face. She now wore her hair down long and straightened. Shikamaru liked it that way. You're really growing up, Naruto. But thanks all the same. So what are you all doing here? Shouldn't you go see Kakashi? Naruto was trying not to think about Kakashi, but he was going to have to see him before the day was over. Naruto put on a forced smile and he nodded. Why don't we all go together? I have some things to ask of Kakashi anyway. Shikamaru shook his head. I can't. I promised Asuma I'd come by to help with the moving. Kurenai and Asuma are expecting. Hinata's eyes went wide and she giggled. Kurenai is pregnant. Shikamaru rolled his eyes and he nodded. Yes, and it's very troublesome when you're the favorite student, although I'm surprised Kurenai doesn't make you help her shop for the baby. Yeesh. Women are so troublesome. He said and Temari kissed his cheek. This one is the worst, believe it or not. Temari laughed and she squeezed his hand. You're so sweet, Nara. I know you love me, despite what you say in front of your friends. Shikamaru tilted his head back and he stood up. Well, we have to be going. Good luck, Naruto. Looks like you have your hands full. Take care, my friend. He said and they shook hands briefly before Shikamaru turned and walked away. Temari followed him and Naruto stood up. We should go to the hospital. I need to see Kakashi. Hinata nodded and she stood up with him. Hanabi, go back home. We'll be there soon enough. Hanabi shook her head. I want to come too. Naruto sighed and he nodded. Okay. Naruto paid for their food and they left the restaurant. They walked along the village trail until they reached the hospital. Naruto sighed and he walked inside. Sakura was there tending to some medical supplies. Naruto, did you come to see Kakashi too? Naruto nodded. Too. Who else would come to see him? She smiled. Jiraiya and Tsunade have been coming by every day to visit him. They're up there now. Come on, I'll go with you. Sakura had just finished her shift and she walked side by side with the three of them. The white walls and the linoleum floor gave the hospital a very somber mood. Sakura stopped once they reached Kakashi's room and she opened the door. Kakashi was sitting up in the bed. He looked fine. Naruto crossed the room and he sat next to his teacher. How are you feeling, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi patted Naruto on the head and he smiled through his mask. Much better than I was, thanks to Sakura and Tsunade. I tell you, medical shinobi are a great group of people. They can fix and heal almost anything. Anyway, my injuries weren't so bad, compared to the others he attacked. We almost lost Raida. Naruto nodded and he heard the door click. Hinata entered and she sat by her boyfriend. Hanabi sat on the other side of the bed. So if you're here, you must have something to ask me. Tsunade told me to be expecting you. What can I do for you? Naruto bit his lip and he chewed it in thought, choosing his words carefully. What can you tell me about the fourth? Hiashi said he was my father. He hates me because of something my father did. Kakashi's eyes drooped closed and he sighed. Well, the fourth was my sensei, just like I am yours. He trained me and taught me everything I knew. He was a good man, and he is a hero in the eyes of most everyone who knew him. The only person who hates Minato is Hiashi Hyuga, because they were once rivals and great friends, until they both set their eyes on a prize that Minato eventually claimed as his own. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She was your mother, Naruto. Hiashi was in love with her too, before he met his now dead wife. Hiashi was determined to make Kushina his own bride, but Kushina and Minato married. Naruto lowered his head and he chewed his lip thoughtfully. Why was I never told any of this? Whose decision was it to keep this from me? Kakashi closed his eyes and he shook his head. Many people. Minato wanted you to have your mother's name after he passed on. Kushina died not long after you were born. He wanted you to learn the proper way about who you were and your origins. The third made the decision to keep it a rank S secret. But that order died with the third. Tsunade reinforced it. She wanted to tell you when you turned 17. But now that the truth is out, there's no sense in keeping it from you. A voice came from the other side of the room. That's right. We can tell you everything now, Naruto. Naruto recognized the voice as Jiraiya. He had entered the room with Tsunade. Are you ready to learn truth to what happened 16.5 years ago, Naruto? Naruto held Hinata's hand in his and he kissed her forehead gently before he nodded. I have so many more questions that I need answered. Why did he seal the Kyuubi into me? Was it to have a weapon in case of war, like Gaara? Tsunade shook her head. No, you weren't a weapon. It was to protect this world. Akatsuki is tracking all 9 of the tailed beasts to create a world in their image. Minato couldn't let Akatsuki get the last one, so he sacrificed himself to save the village, and he sealed the Kyuubi into you. You were the only one he could use, Naruto. It's just as simple as that. You were the only one. Naruto nodded. I don't like it, but I still suffered a lot because of this guy. He said as he patted his stomach. My next question then. Who knew my father best? I want to know who came up with my name. Jiraiya moved close and sat with him. That would be me. I trained Minato when he was a genin. I was the one who named you. I wrote a book before I started the Make Out Paradise series. It was called The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja. The main character of the book, his name was Naruto. The book itself was a complete failure, but Minato loved it. He named you after the protagonist of my book. I guess you could say I'm your godfather, Naruto. Naruto moved closer and he looked up at Jiraiya. Is that why you trained me? Because I was the son of your favorite student. Jiraiya shook his head. Naruto, it goes deeper than that. You're special. Akatsuki is targeting you. I trained you so you could be strong enough to fight off your pursuers. Yes, you remind of Minato. You even are capable of using Rasengan. You perfected it in less than a month. Minato took years to master that jutsu. I think that in time, you could surpass your father completely. He entrusted the future to us all. To you, to me, to Kakashi. We have to do our best to make a dead dream come true. Naruto nodded and he smiled. One more question then. Was my father a good person? Was he the father I want to become one day? Tsunade fielded this question. Minato was a very generous person. He gave aid when he could, and he was a strong shinobi, well deserving of the title 4th Hokage. There was no one better than him. I think his spirit lives on inside of you, Naruto. You already are the man you're supposed to become. You just don't realize it yet. At your age, Minato was very much like you. You inherited your father's looks and beliefs. He too believed in protecting those precious to him. He was a model shinobi. Naruto smiled and he nodded. Thank you. I can be proud then that I'm the son of the 4th Hokage. It just means I have to work harder to be the next Hokage. Tsunade nodded and she smiled. Right. Now, I have something to say. Minato left a will. We found it just recently. Naruto, he left you his old home. I have the key here. It's fairly close to the Uchiha Manor. Tsunade reached into her robe and she withdrew a small silver key. Attached to the key chain was a symbol Naruto recognized. That symbol. It's the symbol on my uniform. Tsunade nodded and she laughed gently. That's right. It's the seal of the Uzumaki clan. It's simple, yet very effective. Naruto smiled and took the key. When can we move into the house? Tsunade nodded and she chuckled. Today. It's a 3-bedroom house, and it's still furnished. No one has set foot inside since the death of your parents. Go look at it with Hinata. We need to talk with Hanabi. Naruto rose excitedly and Hinata did the same. They were both smiling. Alright, just send her over when you're done. We're going now. Hinata and Naruto exited the room and then the hospital, making their way to their new home. Tsunade laughed and she smiled. So much like his father and mother. He's a smart one when he wants to be. Kakashi nodded and he chuckled. So what do we do with Hanabi? Or rather, Where is she going to be staying? Hanabi looked at them all. I want to stay with Hinata and Naruto. Tsunade nodded. That's fine. Just give the two of them some time alone. I hope you don't mind waiting here, Hanabi. Naruto needs some time with Hinata right now. Naruto and Hinata entered the house and they were amazed by how spacious it was. Hinata entered the master bedroom and she sat on the bed. Hey, it's been a while since we were alone. We should make good use of this time. Naruto smiled and he sat on the bed beside her and he held her hand in his. You're right. What do you want to do? Hinata smiled and she moved closer to him and she kissed his cheek. Hold me. Just lie down and hold me. That's all I want. Naruto smiled at the simple request and he kissed her lips affectionately. Of course, Haim, he said, and he wrapped his arms around her to keep her close. Soon the two of them were happily wrapped in each other's arms. Then Hinata asked a question that would change them forever. Naruto, one day, when we're older, do you want a child by me? Naruto kissed her neck and he nodded. I do. I want you to be the mother of my child. Hinata smiled and she rubbed her nose against his gently, and she laid a gentle kiss on his lips. I'm really glad. Your birthday is coming up, isn't it? What do you want for your birthday? Naruto shrugged and he chuckled. I forgot. We're at the end of September now. My birthday will be on the 10th. I just want to be with you. That's all I need. I don't need any gifts, although I wouldn't mind making love that night. Hinata nodded and smiled. That's no problem at all. Naruto nodded and he kissed her once last time before he heard a knock at the door. He swung out of the bed and he opened the door. Tsunade was there with Hanabi. Sorry to disturb you. It has been decided. Hanabi will be staying with you. Her Junin teacher will be Neji. We need a Hyuga to train her. We don't know what's going to happen to your clan Hinata. Without Hiashi, it will fall into disarray. It may fall to you as the oldest child. Be strong, both of you. Naruto, we're counting on you. Naruto smiled and he flashed a thumbs up. No worries. Leave them to me, Hokage. Tsunade chuckled and she nodded. You got it, kid. Good luck. Tsunade turned and walked away. Naruto took Hanabi to her room and she smiled. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Night, sister and brother. Naruto laughed. It still sounds weird. Brother. Hee. He said and he laughed gently before he went back into his own room and curled up in a ball with Hinata and they both fell asleep. Hinata laid her head over Naruto's strong chest and she fell into a deep slumber. It had been a long day for them both. Night had fallen, and they slept while the stars covered the skies above. Chocolate-covered strawberries. The days passed quickly. Naruto and Hinata were happy with their new home. The date was now October 10th. Naruto was deep in slumber. Hinata was in the kitchen making breakfast like she always did. She was frying bacon and eggs and she had cinnamon buns cooking in the oven. They were her favorite food and Naruto liked them as well. Hanabi often spent her time training in the backyard. Hinata trained with her baby sister and they truly were like a happy family. Hinata set the table and Hanabi came from her room, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Morning, sister. Where's Naruto? Hinata took the plates from the kitchen and she gave Hanabi 2 slices of bacon and 1 fried egg, along with some toast and jelly. She then answered her question. He's asleep. It's his birthday today. I have a huge party planned for him, so I need to get him out of the house for a few hours. I have Neji coming by to take him out for a while. Hanabi smiled widely and she giggled. It's his birthday. We need to make a cake. What are you getting for him? Hinata smiled and she giggled. I'm getting him something very special. Do you mind staying the night with Neji tonight? Naruto and I need this time alone. Hanabi smiled and she laughed. Sure, sister. I know what you're planning, so you two have fun tonight. When does the party start anyway? She asked and Hinata sat down at the table with her. It starts at 1 p.m. Would you mind waking him up, Hanabi? I need to get this house ready. Hanabi nodded and she hopped off her chair and she ran into the master bedroom and she jumped onto the bed. Naruto stirred and he rubbed his eyes. Hanabi, what is with all the noise? Can't a guy sleep in on his birthday? Hanabi smiled widely and she jumped on him, giving him a hug. Happy birthday. Hinata wants you to come eat breakfast. Naruto nodded and he swung out of the bed. His long shirt fell around him and he made his way to the bathroom. He washed his face and he hopped into the shower. He washed quickly and he dressed in his usual clothes, except he left the orange and black jacket off. He stepped into the kitchen and his nostrils tingled with the scent of a home-cooked meal. Hinata was quite an accomplished cook and Naruto enjoyed her food immensely. You look happy, said the older Hyuga to her boyfriend. Naruto smiled and he took a plate and took the bacon and eggs Hinata had made him. I am very happy. It's my birthday. How could I not be happy? With a beautiful girlfriend, a wonderful home, and a little sister who is so happy. Hinata smiled and she sat next to Naruto and she brought out the cinnamon buns, one for each of them. I knew you were hiding these somewhere. I could smell them. Naruto and Hinata both reached for the same one and they smiled and they kissed gently. Ew. Get a room, Hanabi said and she laughed. She took the third cinnamon bun and bit into it. Her eyes opened wide and she swallowed it. Hinata, are these homemade? Hinata nodded and she blushed softly. Are they good? Naruto took a bite and he nodded fervently. They're wonderful. I never had anything quite like this before. It even beats red bean soup and ramen. Hinata smiled and she made a mental note that he liked red bean soup. It was also one of her favorite foods. She would have to make that for the party. Then a knock came at the door and Naruto went to open the door and Neji was there. Naruto, come out with me and the guys for a while. Naruto nodded and he stood up. Sounds good to me. Hinata, I'll be going out for a bit. I love you, he said and he exited with Neji. Hinata then quickly cleaned up the kitchen and she went into the storeroom, where she kept everything she needed for the party. A knock came at the door again and Hinata answered it. It was Sakura and Tenten. They were here to help set up for the party. They worked quickly, and they all marveled at their work. In the kitchen were streamers and banners that said Happy 17th. Hinata had made a large platter of appetizers and she made a big pot of red bean soup. Sakura had placed the gifts on a small table and then it was time. The clock read 12:30. Hinata, does Neji know when to bring him back? Tenten and Hinata both nodded. He knows to bring the guys back by 12:45. They all hid and waited. Soon, men's voices could be heard from outside. The door opened and as soon as Naruto stepped foot inside the house all of his friends yelled. Surprise Naruto! Neji clapped him on the shoulder, Lee ran past him into the house and Choji leaned against the wall and smiled. Happy birthday! Everyone said at once. Naruto was taken aback and he crossed the room to Hinata and he gave her a hug and he kissed her. A cheer went up in the room and everyone sat in the living room. Naruto was the center of attention for this day and he had a perpetual grin on his face. They ate together and they all told stories. The hours passed slowly. Naruto had a great time with all his friends. They waited until the sun set and then Neji opened the cooler he had brought with him. Since it's a special day, I asked the Hokage to let us have some light sake. Lee, if you promise not to destroy the house, you can have some too. Lee nodded and they each took a mug and poured sake. They all raised their glasses and they toasted. To another year together. They all said at once and they drank. Eventually they were all tired and the 10 of them were ready to call it a night. No one was drunk, it was very light sake. Lee was calm and he walked out first, followed by Sakura. Hanabi was with Neji and Tenten and they left as well, followed by Ino and Choji. After all their friends had left, Hinata smiled and she kissed Naruto gently. Are you ready for my gift Naruto? He nodded and he smiled. I've been waiting all day long. Hinata smiled and she nodded. Alright, go wait for me in the bedroom. I'll be right there. I have to get ready. Hinata stood up and she went into the bathroom that they shared and Naruto went into their bedroom, and he sat on the bed. He lay back on the bed and he closed his eyes and he let her get ready. Her voice called out to him. Close your eyes and open your mouth. She said and Naruto did as he was asked. He closed his eyes and when he opened his mouth he tasted chocolate. Bite down, she said and Naruto bit down. He tasted a sweet and fruity taste. He kept his eyes closed and she smiled. Open your eyes, Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes and what he saw caused his heart to race. She was standing there in a black lacy bra and black lace panties. Naruto felt his heart beat so fast it felt like he was going to die. In her hand was a bowl of chocolate-covered strawberries. Where did you come up with this idea? She shook her head and she fed him another strawberry. He swallowed it and he understood what she wanted. She sat next to him and he fed her one as well. She smiled and she kissed him. You taste good, she said, and he smiled and he held her hand and he kissed her back. So do you. Why go to such lengths for me? Hinata smiled and she reached behind her back and she unclipped her bra and she let her bare ass dig into his back as she hugged him from behind. Because I love you and you deserve it. Naruto smiled and he knew where this was going. He fed her another strawberry and she swallowed it happily. Naruto lifted his arms up and she drew his shirt over his head, caressing his strong sculpted body. Naruto turned to face her and he placed his hands on her shoulders and he kissed her gently at first and then he kissed her a little deeper. He could feel his body reacting to her, his shaft now fully erect from her touch and he kisses. Hinata then slipped his shorts off and she smiled. You really want this, don't you? She asked and he nodded, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He laid her down on her back and she happily slid her black laced underwear off her body. Naruto was feeling really good. Before he penetrated her, he spoke. What about the barrier? She smiled and she shook her head. It's alright. I want this to happen tonight. I want to make our future. Naruto smiled and he nodded. With one swift motion, the blonde shinobi was inside of the raven-haired kunoichi. Hinata gripped his shoulders and she gasped loudly as Naruto began to thrust deep inside of her. She could feel her vagina expand to take his full 5 inches inside of her. She winced a bit. She was still getting used to. Naruto saw he was being too rough and he kissed her. Sorry. Hinata shook her head and she kissed him. It's okay. Just do it normally, she said, and Naruto brought his hand to her cheek and he started to thrust inside of her, using long gentle strokes to please her. Hinata threw her head to the side in rapture as she felt him inside of her. She cried out gently and Naruto sped his pace. Naruto rested his body over hers and he continued to thrust, and he placed kisses on her neck and her lips. He took her hand and he pressed his palm to hers and he smiled. Naruto. She whimpered in sheer ecstasy. She could feel her body reacting with each thrust. She couldn't hold it in much longer. She gasped loudly and she gripped the bed sheets firmly. She leaned her head back, her body arched, and she felt wave after powerful wave of sheer pleasure coursing through her body. It